I'm here with the 85 Honda Sabre Cafe conversion. I've got my clutch lever working, I've got my brakes working, I got my mojo working. Welcome to Hack-A-Week. I've got the front brake working. I went ahead and took apart the master cylinder and did a clean out. Did the trick, actually. It didn't really need a rebuild. It just needed to be cleaned out of some debris. So I can take you through what it took to do that, and actually the clutch lever as well. The clutch master cylinder was a bit messed up. That got a full rebuild kit that I bought online and put in there. I can show you here in the bench an example of what it takes to rebuild a master cylinder on this bike, and it will apply to actually quite a few other bikes. They're pretty much basically the same. There are some subtle differences, but they all basically consist of a cylinder right here where my thumb is moving that has a piston that pushes in and out of that cylinder, and that assembly is right here. And this is a used one, but this is what the rebuild kit looks like. Essentially is these pieces with the brand new rubber seals and the lock rings that go on there and hold everything in place. So I'll take this one apart now and give you a step-by-step of what it takes to get inside one of these and do a rebuild. To rebuild a master cylinder, of course, you will need a rebuild kit, and it pretty much looks like this, like I described earlier. To get inside all of this, the first thing that has to happen with any master cylinder built this way, the lever has to come off, the actual brake lever. This one has a 10mm nut on the bottom that's on a screw. So we'll take the nut off first, and then you'll see that there's a screw on the top. That threads into the bottom right here, and that's what makes the lever stay in place and make it able to be locked down with a nut right here, is that this screws into this. So you take this down, tighten it up snug, and then put the nut on. That's on reassembly. But to take it apart, take that nut off and then unscrew this. This is a shoulder bolt or shoulder screw in this instance, because it has this shoulder built onto it. That's why it's called a shoulder bolt. So there's that, and the lever comes off. Then there's a rubber boot that comes out. That will come with the rebuild kit too. And down inside here is a spring clip, and it's way down deep inside there. And I'll see if I can get some other light on that here in a second and give you a good look at what it is. What you take that out with is a pair of snap ring pliers. And these are inner snap ring pliers. When you squeeze them, they bring the ring together and make it smaller so you can extract it out of something. So they work for inner ones. This one you can take apart and move it to this pivot point, and then they work for outer. So you can pick these up pretty reasonable at most auto parts stores, places like that. Look for them there. Let's take a closer look at that clip down in there now in some good light. Looks like this is it. This is the angle you get. If you look down in there pretty close, you'll see those two little tabs on a ring that have a hole in them. There's one, and let's see, there's the other one. There they are. And what you do is you poke the snap ring pliers down in there into those holes, squeeze them together, and then you can lift that out. And that is what I'm going to do next. Okay, it just clicked in right there, I think. Squeeze, yes. Out comes the piston and the first seal. That's the seal to the outside world right there. And then further down inside is the other seal. It's stuck in there right now. Okay, so to get that out, you can poke down in there with a really skinny little screwdriver and just kind of hook it and pop it out. Out it comes with this nasty, crusty, rusty spring. Now what you want to look for down inside there is corrosion and rusting and such. This one doesn't look too bad. It's nice and shiny. As I look around on the inside of it, I see nice shiny bore. That's what you want. If you see pits and rust, forget it. Chuck it. It's no good. This one's rebuildable. So there's the old guts, and what we would do now, if this were a brand new rebuild kit, we would clean this out really good, and if possible, you can go buy a tiny little honing stone. It's on the end of a wand that you put it on an electric drill, and it goes in there, and it's got these little stones that spin around like this inside the bore, and it'll clean it out. It's called a brake master or a wheel cylinder hone. Auto parts store might have one. If you've got one that's really, really corroded in there, you should get in there and do that. Or you can fake it by taking some sandpaper and just, rolling it up and poking it in the hole and just working it around in there. Maybe put a dowel inside to help you out with that, but you could do that yourself with fine, fine sandpaper though, 400 grit or higher. Take your time, nothing rough. Repeat, nothing rough. You'll ruin it, won't work. It's got to be kind of like you're trying to polish it. But just try cleaning it with a rag and some solvent first if it looks really bad, like this one does. But this could be brought back to life. This is a good usable core, no problem. And sometime I'll probably rebuild that and keep it on the shelf as a spare. Now, the one for the clutch, pretty much the same thing, just a slightly different mechanism on the way that the lever came apart. Once you've got everything reassembled, you put it all back on the bike, connect the hose back up, get a little fluid in here. I'm going to top that off just a little bit. Now this one I have already bled, but I want to show you the procedure to bleed the brakes. Bleeding the brakes means you want to get the air out of the system. You don't want any air in the system on a hydraulic brake or clutch mechanism because the air will compress. Fluid does not compress. Air does compress. So if there's air in there, it'll make the lever feel a little bit spongy, and that's not good. So we'll get some fluid in there, and when you do this on a fresh rebuild, you'll see some little bubbles come up, work their way out of the cylinder area. You give the lever a few squeezes back and forth, and be careful on some bikes. A little squirt of fluid will come back up each time you release the lever, and it can make a big mess, so be aware of that. Put some rags around everything and cover it all up. So we'll put the cover back on this now. Here's a little thing I do that will get the fluid bled out a little bit quicker, and that is to break open this banjo fitting right here. Just crack it loose with a wrench. Then give this a little bit of a squeeze. Just a little bit of pressure on it, open that up, and just let it squeeze all the way closed, and then close it back up. Don't release the lever with this open, you'll suck air back into the system. So you do that a few times, and that will purge the air out of this area and out of the master cylinder pretty quickly, and it'll also let some air work its way back up out of the brake line. Then we'll go down below and give it a couple bleeds down at the caliper. Here's the caliper, here's the brake bleeder screw right here. It takes an 8mm wrench to loosen it up. Get it broke loose first. I usually put a hose on here to catch the fluid as it comes out, otherwise it squirts out, it gets all over everything. Put a rag down on your tire and rim just to keep that clean. And if you put the wrench on first, and you push the hose into place, it takes a bit of coordination here because that hose may or may not stay on there. But anyway, let's get that set up. Hose is in place. I'm going to give the lever a light squeeze, and then you can see the fluid come out. Now close it. Now release the lever. Don't release the lever until the valve is closed. Let's do that one more time. Squeeze the lever a little bit. Open the valve. Close it. When there's no more bubbles coming out, you're done. And the brakes are bled. Make sure it's tight, not really tight, just snug. Put the cap back on and let's move on. This brake caliper is seized up in the sense that it doesn't want to push back in too easily. It pushed out okay with the brake lever doing its thing there, but it needs to be pried back this way quite a bit. So I've been trying a couple of ways of doing that. I already did the other side, and I noticed that a screwdriver didn't offer much, and you can't really do much with a screwdriver down in there. So I got some of these vice grips from my welding gear and decided, well, maybe I can just use it like a clamp and try to work it back a little. So with a little bit of effort and some patience, by squeezing on that and cranking it up a little tighter each time. And so this one decided, no, doesn't want to do that. The other side did. So I'm just going to pull the banjo fitting right here and get this thing off the bike and do some work on it on the bench where I can really get at everything. Right then, let's see, we've got it stuck in the vise now. Try to even it up just a little bit more here if I can, and give it a squeeze a little at a time so we can get the caliper to push back in. To watch out for fluid to come out of here, because if it goes, it's gonna squirt out. Cover that up with a rag. Ooh, something gave. Let's find out what that was, shall we? Yeah, okay, well, it broke loose. Good. So now I've got the brake pad out of my way. I can get in there with some sandpaper now and go over these and clean them up really good with just some 220 sandpaper, something like that. This is what you want to do. Both of the pistons in both directions if you can. In other words, like there, here, you know, just move the sandpaper around so that you're actually sanding different parts of the whole thing. This is the result you get. This is before, this is after, with just that little bit of effort. So you get them clean like that first, then we'll move on to the next step. Just keep working them down as far as I can get them. Once they get broke loose and start to move, and you work in some of that fluid, that helps a lot. So I'm going to paint just a little more on here now, so we get some more of the brake fluid down inside there on that seal to help lubricate it. That's why they stick. You can dry it out. These are pushed back flush. I moved them back and forth a whole bunch of times, and I got a lot of the crud and yuck out of this area up in here. You'll find that's a place where lots of dust and debris collects. Got the pins pulled out, and I'm going to drop the brake pads back in on the pins. Brake pads loaded up. Let's put the carrier back on. And then we can mount it up to the front fork and test it out. See if it actually squeezes and releases okay. Alright, let's check it out. It will spin. It's got some drag, but that's not terrible considering it was completely seized up. Now I squeeze the brake, it locks up, so I know it's functioning. And there's a bit of drag there, but it's not anything I don't think I could just get rid of with a couple of miles of driving and some hard braking. So there's that tank, that profile that's just crying out to be shaped into something that looks badass and also is functional as a gas tank. So I'm going to park the camera right here, and I'm going to get at this one old school style, I think, where I'm just going to get out a pencil, and I've got a center line drawn here, and based on some stuff that I've looked at online and a lot of inspiration from the Ducati 900S. I like the tank on the Ducatis a lot, really inspired by those, but I also like the old British tanks, you know. So maybe a hybrid of both, but I'm thinking something about finishes up my next hot wire foam cutter device I've built here. This is what I'm going to move the tank through. Here's a hot wire right here, spring loaded, so that when it gets warm and expands a little, the spring will keep tension on it. And this is 90 degrees to this platform. Let's cut out a tank. Okay, template is securely fastened. I've got this shimmed up so that it's going to be pretty much the same profile as the way that it sits on the motorcycle. It has to be that way because I'm cutting straight down through it, and that outline I drew with it sitting on the bike, so it needs to be cut at that position. Understand all that? Okay, anyway, this thing I already tested out, it works okay. I'm just going to follow the actual paper of the template. I'm going to be brave, no actual guide, see how close I can get to cutting this. So let's power up the hot wire here with some juice. Zap. Here goes everything. If I keep this a little on the outside of the template, I should be okay, because then I can come back later and just sand the places that I want to get it a little more cleaner line, I guess I should say. But so far so good. Boy, this is nasty smoke. Don't really want to breathe a lot of that. Whew. There we go. Now we're starting to look like a gas tank. Kind of like this. Let's chuck it on the bike and see what it looks like now. Ooh. Things are getting interesting looking now. Now what I need to do is scoop this out a little bit right here, kind of like this, right along here. About as deep as that one layer right there, so that the tank can sit down onto the frame here and actually come down below the level of the frame just a little bit. We're ready for the next step in the cutting process. This jig is now mounted on the tank blank, and I will just follow along with these outlines that you see right here, and that's what will cut out the section for it to drop onto the frame. Now this angle right here slopes down a little bit, a little less here, so I may have to come back later, move the jig a little bit, and cut that again. Not too bad. Looks like it followed the contour pretty well. Let's get it out of the jig and see how it fits on the bike. Pretty good fit, but like I thought, down here at the bottom where the frame meets up, it's a little bit different line right here. Hard to see right here in the dark, but I need to make this cut a little bit deeper up here. Now that fits pretty well. Really nice and tight right here around the frame, all the way down. You can see how it just runs kind of even with the tube. I've got a little bit of hogging out to do here on a couple of things. There's the clutch hydraulic line. I need to make a recess for that. And then the air box, by the time that goes back on, right here in the bottom there will have to be a area that gets carved out a bit to clear all that. But back here everything fits just like I wanted it to, and I will incorporate onto the fiberglass portion when I get to that part a piece that comes down here, and then I can utilize the bolt for the stock tank right there. Up on the front to anchor it, Still a little up in the air. I've got a couple of usable lugs here. There's one right there that I could capitalize on. I could bring a little tab down to that. And there's one on the other side too. So that would be a way to anchor it to the bike. The air box is back in place. There's the section that I need to recess on the tank for the air box, and I have kind of traced it out right there. And I think what I'm going to do is just get after it with a razor knife here and just slice right in there and start taking out some foam. There it is, all hogged out for everything that has to clear, and when I put fiberglass in here, that'll build back up a little, so that'll all kind of even out in the end. Now it's time to start thinking about contours and shaping on this, and I think I want to just taper this edge a little bit with a bevel to start, and then we'll do a radius later. So I'm going to take my depth gauge here and start marking 1.25" marks along the edge, and I'll join these dots together, and I'll use that as a guide for the shaping. Like so. One side down. So I've got those basic contours cut. Now let's get after it with a little 80 grit to smooth out that cut. Well, I'm pretty pleased with the progress this week. I've got a gas tank now that actually looks like a gas tank, and I like these beveled contours that I've got going on. I may just leave the bevels and not do the curves. It looks kind of racy. I like it. Now it's time to hunt down a petcock. That'll mount right here, and I need to know what size insert to put into my fiberglass when I start glassing this up. I also have to get a fuel cap. I'm going to put a flush mount racing style fuel cap on there. I'm pretty stoked that I got the clutch and the brakes working okay and the front caliper freed up, because that means I don't have to rebuild the front caliper. I don't have to buy one now. Next episode we'll get into the front forks. We're going to have to pull the front forks off to put on some new dust seals. The main seals I think are okay. There's no oil coming out of there. I guess I'll know once I start driving it around. And then we got to get started on the seat. So there's all kinds of stuff coming up, and there'll probably be at least 2, 3, maybe even 4 more episodes before we're all done with this thing. So anyway, till next time. We're going to work on this tank this time around. Welcome to Hank a Week. Hank a Week.